Hello and good morning, everybody. Good morning, BRS enthusiasts. I'm Frederik van der Putte, since February, the CEO of SERA and the president of BRS. And I'm actually very, very happy that I've been asked to introduce Olivier. I've met Olivier in 2015 when I was meeting some people who are active in impact investing. And Olivier had been active in impact investing before we knew that it was a word. He'd been innovating different business models in circular economy, etc. So it was fantastic to meet him at that stage. As a matter of fact, Olivier founded Close the Gap in 2003, following a mini enterprise project at the VUB in Brussels as part of his study project. And Close the Gap's mission became to bridge the digital divide by providing high-quality, pre-owned IT devices donated by sponsors, big corporations, for example, to educational, medical, and social projects in the developing world. And Olivier managed to mobilize a lot of devices. Since the start, they donated 1.5 million devices, benefiting or reaching 5.5 million people in 50 countries. And that's not where he stopped. Close the Gap developed into a digital for development platform. And a platform, it's one of these things, it's like you don't really know what they do, but each time when you meet Olivier, he's involved with new ideas, with new companies that he's setting up. And all of these projects contribute to basically helping local people develop their own lives. Close the Gap secured private sector investments, and always from a no aid but trade philosophy, on the ground in Africa. And he started a social enterprise in Kenya. He set up the first incubator on the East Coast, benefiting educational, innovation and manufacturing entrepreneurs. Close the Gap also established a circular economy hub, very similar to what they did previously here in Belgium. And some of you may have seen the video of their site in Mechelen, where they refurbish equipment. They did the same thing now in Mombasa. And to ensure the success of all these companies, he moved there with his family and his 2 children. On several occasions, Close the Gap collaborated on projects with KBC and BRS. And a recent collaboration involved our MFI partner, Busa Gonofa in Ethiopia, with KBC staff involved in doing a security screening of their infrastructure and Close the Gap providing the equipment. Which brings me to the topic of today, the importance of digital technology. Digital is everywhere in our lives, and certainly in the financial and the microfinance sectors, it's paramount. Digital technology helps, for example, to lower the costs and to improve the services they can provide to their clients. But it also provides new challenges. It requires investment, it requires training for staff and for clients. And this is a topic where the cybersecurity team of KBC has shared its experience with MFI partners in Africa, Latin America, and Southeast Asia. And now I make a little bridge to the 8th of May. On the 8th of May, we have the General Assembly of the BRS Microfinance Co-op Fund, where we have Loïc de Canière, and Loïc is here as our guest to speak about his book, Afrika, een gedroomde toekomst. And in this book, Loïc highlights the importance of technology, for example, to create a lot of new jobs for all these young people that are coming to the market, if you want. And in Africa, we need to find great jobs for them. And that's exactly what Close the Gap is involved in. So I'm very happy that I can now hand over to Olivier, given that he is very knowledgeable and passionate about this topic, given that he's an entrepreneur pur sang, with boots on the ground. He just flew in from Mombasa overnight. And he's been an inspiration to me and probably to many of you. So I hope you'll find this a very interesting presentation. Olivier, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Will. Good afternoon, everybody. Thank you so much, Frederik, for the very kind words. I'm just looking for the pointer. And indeed, I just flew in last night. I was still with my family enjoying a Sunday afternoon in Mombasa. in a bit warmer temperatures than here. But at least it's not raining. Everybody told me, get ready for rain jackets, but when the Ethiopian Airlines flight dropped Zaventem at 9 a.m., it was completely dry and even a blue sky. So I feel very much as being in the extension of Mombasa here. And a big, big thank you to BRS and Kurt and his team and KBC Bank and Sarah for hosting this and for having me for this lunch discussion. As said already, KBC has been and BRS one of the very early partners of Close the Gap in almost, let's say, my study time startup at the University of Brussels. And so it feels extremely nice, almost over 2 decades later, to be here, but also feeling we are all aging a bit, talking about myself now. So a bit of an introduction. I feel like rather being I'm a Belgian, obviously, by blood, but I think since 5 years, it's fair to say that I feel being a Kenyan African by heart. I was born in Belgium, in Leuven. Many people often ask me these days, what was the link with Africa? So I just put on my slide that my mom and dad happened to be born both in DRC, but as you can see, they came back in 1960 as very small children, so there was not that much influence at home. Nevertheless, beautiful stories from the grandparents of the colonial times. I founded Close the Gap in 23. The first real milestone of my Africa love was when my Belgian wife and me got married in 2011 in South Africa. Then I left shortly after my duo job with Deloitte, where I was also working for over 14 years. Actually, in the beginning days of Close the Gap, also to overcome a bit the burden and I would say the anxiety of really stepping full-time in the entrepreneurial life. So I was very grateful to Deloitte for having given me this best of both worlds for a number of years. But then I realized it's really time to completely jump in the topic of your life and of your passion of your life, and that was for me impact investment in Africa. And so after leaving Deloitte, I was very grateful meeting Dominique Dumoulin. Unfortunately, he's not able to be here today, but as a very successful Belgian entrepreneur, he really has put the money where his mouth is in 2018 and helped me setting up Close the Gap Africa Investment as a for-profit entity that made my family then move to Kenya just a couple of months later and start the venture of Close the Gap. So I'm here today not as a Belgian businessman, but really as a Kenyan skin-in-the-game entrepreneur. And I think that's an important nuance in the topic of today about digital inclusion and the impact on poverty alleviation and job creation. As a second parenthèse, I'd like to say, knowing that one of my predecessors was Michael Joseph, the founder of M-Pesa. M-Pesa is, for me now, something I really use, let's say, 10 to 20 times a day, from paying small tips to people to paying your electricity bills. But I'm very proud living in a country where these digital fintech solutions were already developed in a time that the rest of the world was probably not even thinking about peer-to-peer banking without using a bank and doing it from a telco perspective. Actually, the real story of M-Pesa, and I think that's very nice also for many of you in the audience coming from the development sector as well, is that a small grant from the UK development aid was given because of the success of microfunding in the early 2000s, and that women, particularly in a very, let's say, dangerous environment called Kibera, a big slum in Nairobi, were actually transacting with small amounts of money for sharing their types of agriculture produce or other produce, and to make it more safe for them, instead of moving that money by hand from one to another, that UK, let's say, grant was used to set up the system, which eventually became then M-Pesa and was taken with two hands by Vodafone at the time, and today Safaricom. By far the most successful company in the entire sub-Saharan Africa company ecosystem. It was all about falling and rising. I really left to Mombasa 5 years ago. I'm now 44, so I was 39 when I moved. I was already running some businesses here, but then you move to a new country, new language, new tax system, new environment, informal economy. Even I knew a lot about it by engaging with those countries for the last 15 years. Once you are really a skin-in-the-game entrepreneur and you have responsibility towards the government there and stakeholders, employment, it really felt like starting again as a 20-year-old. And that gave me, on the one hand, lots of energy, but also quite some reality shocks that actually some trial and error really occurred a lot. So in the beginning, they called me a Muzungu, which is the Swahili word, as many of you know, for a white man. And now I'm sometimes called Bazoo by our teams, which means kind of more boss. I like the symbolic behind it. I definitely don't want to be seen as a boss because I try to be more the inspirator in our company, and we have a local Kenyan management team. But it's showing that they don't look at you as this tourist, as this person that comes and goes and does potentially nice things, but really they look at you as one of them and just with another skin color. And I feel extremely valued in Kenya, and I think the hospitality of our African brothers and sisters, and the Kenyans in my case, is extremely remarkable, and very grateful for that. So today, to wrap up on this, my main occupations as a serial entrepreneur is obviously Close the Gap Africa Group, where we work with the headquarters in Mombasa. We also opened a branch in Kinshasa, one in Kampala, Uganda, and one in Johannesburg. So those are our 4 hubs. Originally still influenced by the headquarters here in Brussels, where our general manager, Peter, with our team is here present. We also are in the process of setting up a missing middle impact investment fund called Tukio Capital, which is investing in 40 missing middle investments, approximately ticket sizes between 150 and 400,000 euros. It's being structured in Mauritius and typically also going for follow-up investments of previously early stage investments in the sphere of people and planet. I can give more information on that later also offline, but it's one of the things we are setting up in Southern Africa and in Kenya and in Egypt together with 3 GPs, and following a bit of what I will show you later in the presentation, the experiences we've had the last 5 years. With Close the Gap, we're also an anchor investor in Bit Capital Partners from the Netherlands, with also offices in Rwanda and Uganda. It's more an investor readiness company. I'm myself a board member in the Management University of Africa, a bit like the Vlerik School of Nairobi, lots of focus on governance. Also in the largest hub from Mombasa called Swahilipot. And then in Belgium, Digital for Youth Belgium. I also really like to put emphasis on that because we live in this globalized world, but at the end of the day, all problems we see anywhere on the globe, I believe, are very similar, whether it's in the old school so-called first world or in the emerging or developing world. So I also think you can only excel if you also realize how to do how to act on those initiatives and evolutions in your own countries. And last but not least, also be central in Brussels. So a little bit of name dropping here before I show you a video. We were very happy as well that we had some royal and presidential visits to Close the Gap in the last 2 years in Africa. The previous president of Kenya, Uhuru, visited our company, and also the actual president, Ruto. We also had the pleasure of having the president's spouse, the second lady, as we call her, Her Excellency Pastor Dorcas, and very grateful last year that our Belgian King and Queen also visited our newly opened branch in South Africa on the state visit. So that's a bit as an introduction on how those things were enabled, but today it's really a great occasion to show you an 8-minute video, more like a documentary, and the 2 realizators, film producers are here, Mick van Brustegem and Jan van Parijs from myimpacts.org, and together with some tax shelters support Close the Gap, and with them they actually came for over a week to Mombasa to interview the full ecosystem. And I think after this video I can deep dive more in the topic of today without having to go too much into our own organization, but it will probably give you some more insights, make it more tangible what we do there, and how this digital inclusion then really gets into the face of creating jobs and alleviating poverty. Making an impact that matters and showing that as a corporate, as a social enterprise, you can really disrupt positively livelihoods, create opportunities, make people self-sufficient and help people to basically be independent from all types of welfare and aid schemes. I think that's really my motivation of setting up Close the Gap here in Kenya. My belief is that there is a big room to play for social enterprises and for companies just in general acting as a force for good. Originally, Close the Gap 20 years ago was founded in Belgium, in the capital of Europe, in Brussels, as a tech-enabling organization, bringing basically computer hardware to underprivileged environments in sub-Saharan Africa. The dream here in Mombasa was really to be a connector, a hub function, to create a place where people from all walks of life, here from the coastal area, could feel at home. Here at the Close the Gap Hub, we try really to be a kind of a federator function. We try to bring together so many different actors that are working in the industry of creating opportunities. On top, obviously, creating a place where you can work in security, where you can work in a good atmosphere, with a gym, with clean toilets, with healthy food, where we have some great events and training facilities, where we have a maker space, and where we just have like lots of co-working spaces.
The hub is instrumental in bridging the digital divide as we create an opportunity for entrepreneurs to network, to connect, to be able to access tools so that it can bolster their businesses and also their learning.
My name is Lilian Wambua. I am the CEO of Nia Ventures, and we are a business training, advisory and consultancy firm. Close the Gap is one of our partners, and we use it to create a space where our entrepreneurs can come, get the training, also come network with other entrepreneurs as well. And also just come, we always have a lot of networking events. They have happy hour that creates a very conducive environment for entrepreneurs like myself and the ones that we support.
My name is Daylin Bichanga. We recruit young entrepreneurs with business ideas or businesses that are running between 1 month to 2 years. The hub provides a safe space. Strong internet connectivity enables me to do more research and also to work better.
I'm proud to bridge the digital divide.
Close the Gap Kenya has 3 main activities. The Close the Gap computer upcycling business is all done in the port area of Mombasa, where we upcycle on average 30,000 to 50,000 computers every year with our team of Kenyan engineers, warehouse managers, and a full team of sales managers, which actually bring those computers to the young aspiring entrepreneurs in this country. So going from students, university students, to founders and startup teams. And we do that by utilizing a network of resellers and also through our own shop here in Mombasa City.
This is Close the Gap computer shop. Clients are free to walk in and buy a laptop and go home with it, but our larger clientele who buy in bulk also get to get a touch and feel and sample our quality before they commit to buying for an institution or organization. I'm proud to bridge the digital divide.
The second business unit of Close the Gap is what we call Boost Your Learning. So this is more like our educational program, and that is where basically a local team here in the hub is creating innovation challenges, hackathons, trainings on soft skills, on hard skills, helping entrepreneurs to be fit for purpose and ready to boost their own startup. So every week I would expect in this hub we have between 100 and 300 people coming through the programs.
My name is Elisha Shama. I'm a techpreneur. The different innovations which I've done is like one of them, I've been able to transform a phone into a DSLR. Because of the different innovations which I've done, I'm now the CEO of a company called Tech Fusion, and I'm glad that I already have 10 partnerships with companies in Kenya because they are really interested on how I'm building solutions to problems which exist.
Close the Gap meant a lot to me because I was a videographer by talent, but I didn't have the proper knowledge on business and to handle videography as a business. So when I came to Close the Gap, I learned a lot on business, how I can manage my business, and more about branding and keeping records of my business.
My name is Emma Momomjalo, and I'm the founder of Buchetis Naturals. Close the Gap is helping me with marketing strategies because I didn't quite know how to articulate this and explain this to the industry because to the market is full of hair care products and I wanted to stand out. So that is what Close the Gap is helping me with right now.
I'm proud to bridge the digital divide.
The third business unit is then Boost Your Business. And Boost Your Business is our incubator. So that's the Close the Gap Accelerator program, where we basically utilize the output of the students that have come up with, let's say, their initial business plans, and where we help them to really fund it with some high-risk, high-impact capital.
My name is Denison Kangi. I am the CEO and co-founder of Kuza Pizza. Kuza is a Swahili word that means to grow. So we are trying to grow or to empower small-scale businesses in the fish value chain by enabling them cap post-harvest losses and sustainably improve their income. And we thought of how can we empower these communities by using the power of the sun to offer affordable refrigeration. And we do this by offering a pay-as-you-go payment model, which means we are able to monitor the products remotely, and we are able to make the small-scale fisher folks to pay as low as $2 per day for a period of 12 months after which they own the products. We got access to Boost Your Business program, which was running under the Close the Gap. So by participating in that program, we were able to go through training, and also we were able to crowdfund for over 250,000 Kenya shillings, which enabled us to take our prototype from the prototype stage to an MVP and to a product now which is currently in the market. In sub-Saharan Africa, we have about 12.3 million small-scale fishers who are also going through the same challenges. So we are seeing Kuza Freezer not only supporting businesses in the coast region, but also scaling to East Africa and sub-Saharan Africa at large. I am proud to bridge the culture gap in the fish value and supply chain in Africa.
The real passion why Close the Gap is doing this is to actually help those young people to bring them in a space where they can focus on making it happen and making sure that there is also money put on the table, that it's not only blah, blah, blah. We try to be a kind of not only a dream catcher here, but also a dream enabler. But it's not our dream, it's their dream. And that makes me proud that we can help realizing dreams into self-sufficient, successful, investor-ready young startups that are not only changing the ecosystem for the good, but also improving the lives of the boys and girls, translating those dreams into real-life businesses.
I'm proud to bridge the digital divide.
Thank you very much, and thank you, Mick and Jan, for the great work you've done. Yeah. So when we speak about the topic of digital inclusion, it's now easier for me to give some insights. Because we see, obviously, those type of figures in newspapers, but what is exactly digital inclusion? Definitely coming from the world of today, where all of us our lives are completely digitalized from everything you do, basically, in a day. But what is then the meaning of it when you speak about poverty alleviation? So there is definitely some challenges if you look still today to the African continent. This slide of the global fiber optic network, and where you see the data centers are the red dots, you can see that in Mombasa, we actually, one of my good friends even happened to be the co-founder of the company that brought the first marine cable to Mombasa. So there is very good data internet availability, but as you can see, it's mostly surrounded by the coast, and it's not as dense as we see like in North America or in Europe. So there is definitely lacking behind there. On the next slide, I'm showing you a couple of figures. So those are figures from the ITU Institute in Geneva. So we see that the least developed countries in Africa, mainly in sub-Saharan Africa, systemically score lowest on connectivity and global inclusion measurements. Some of the most important statistics are shown here. So 89% of the African population has mobile coverage, which is very good, I would say, compared to a couple of years ago or a decade ago. Europe, or the global coverage, would be at 97%. But what does such a statistic say if you know that only 28% of the African population uses this internet, while globally the average is over 51%? So it's not necessarily because of having a very good coverage that the usage is there. On the gender division, I also liked this statistic. So the division between males and females, digital access is highest in Africa, 17%, compared to the rest of the world, where it is on 7%. So, 17 on the world's average, and in Africa on 7%. So in Africa, only 20.2% of the female users have access to this digital infrastructure, compared to 37% of the men, and worldwide that would be on 48% for women and 55% for men. So if you look at those statistics, I would say the work of the numerous hubs you see in Africa, similar as the one we run with Close the Gap, is definitely making a very significant progress, but there is still a very big, I would say, gap to overcome. If we look at the digital divide, and this I still remember 20 years ago when I was writing my thesis on the same subject, quite a bit of those barriers that I've written here were already known at that time, and organizations in Belgium were also working on them, but they're still very relevant. So the four main barriers we see today when you get to digital inclusion and to make it effective is the lack of reliable digital infrastructure, the haves and the have-nots. We have Digital for Youth Belgium represented here with its general manager. This is typically what Digital for Youth is still doing in Belgium for a very large needy population of youth, definitely from disadvantaged environments. But again, also, it's not only the digital infrastructure that lacks, it's also the poor access to digital technology. Thirdly, the horizontal and the vertical digital skills mismatch. I'll say something about that. And then also the lack of conducive policies fostering digital inclusion. So now more on our ecosystem in Africa. This fundamental lack of reliable digital infrastructure, despite significant investments in the past decade, the presence of a digital infrastructure doesn't necessarily imply digital inclusion, as access to digital technology must be assured as well. As statistically, 89% of the population in Africa has mobile coverage, but only 28% uses internet as such. So it's really about going hand in hand between those two. And then the affordability of this digital technology access remains still a very big barrier. The digital resources today we still see them being a luxury product in most sub-Saharan African countries for the vast majority of the population. And something the middle and the lower class definitely cannot afford if they would just have to rely on the market supply demand. And that's where then a program like Close the Gap obviously fits in. And luckily many others doing this in other parts of the continent. When we talk about the horizontal and the vertical digital skill mismatch, that's quite an interesting one, and I'm sure that will resonate with you also in your day-to-day experiences if you're an entrepreneur or an employee. The digital inclusion only occurs, obviously, when the right people with the right skills perform the right jobs and activities. And what we typically see much more in Africa than I would say in industrialized countries is that this mismatch happens on this vertical and the horizontal way. So the vertical level mismatch would be that an individual fulfills jobs where they either are digitally overskilled or underskilled. And that then creates underemployment, so people would do jobs that are literally not fitting on their core strengths. And then the horizontal mismatch is even worse because there it's creating unemployment because it's literally individuals that do not enter the job market as they do not meet the minimal digital skills. So that's really my feeling and experience also with our work in Mombasa is that's what we called in the movie also the boost your learning, that this learning component in this inclusion is very important. And then obviously the lack of conducive policies, that's something, as we all know, with the vast amount of legislation and policies made here, definitely in Brussels with the EU, ITU and so on. Africa is definitely not missing that, I would say, that high-speed policy making I would say, line of business, but it's definitely not at the same scale of adopting it and of being able to also share it to the vast portion of the population, because there's often lots of jargon in those texts and it needs to come up bottom up, top down, lots of awareness is needed. And so it's definitely work in progress, but we see that that's definitely one of the reasons why the digital divide and the inclusion is not at the level where we would like to see it. So coming back to my personal experience over the last 2 decades, and preparing this keynote, for me, digital inclusion is definitely not an end on itself. It's definitely only a way to do something else and more impactful. And so what we at Close the Gap like to say is that digital inclusion should lead to digital entrepreneurship programs. I'm truly a believer, and I'm translating this now from a Dutch proverb they all say, where we say only the sun goes up for nothing. And alleen de zon gaat op voor niets. I truly believe more and more now, living in Africa as well, being in this 2024 era, that the entrepreneurial model is the only one that actually can create sustainable employment and making people self-reliant and not dependent or less dependent in the beginning from welfare, from aid, from overseas help. And I'm obviously saying that for that layer of people that can afford that step of let's say, of improvement of livelihoods. I'm not saying that NGO work or government involvement is not necessary, not at all. I'm just saying if you look to that Maslow pyramid for a large portion of people where you know that those basic values and needs are covered, I think from that layer onwards, an entrepreneurial approach via a digital program is undoubtedly the only and the best way forward to utilize, I would say, limited means for huge outcome, and where you can tap into the support of public-private partnerships. So definitely not saying private sector needs to do this alone or impact investors. It's definitely working together in PPPs, but also involving the informal sector. I think in a country like Kenya, and definitely in Mombasa, which is not the #1 country, being Nairobi, you see if you want to be successful, you should definitely not only go and knock on the door of the existing technical universities or government training programs like the likes of Forem, VDAB, which we also have there. You should also go deeper and work with informal sector, and therefore have local teams that really come from those areas so that they can act as an ambassador, getting those people involved in those programs. Just seeing if I... Yeah, so it's about infrastructure and device provision that needs to be done, because without a device, obviously, you can't even engage in an e-learning. It's about the education on the digital literacy, the networking connectivity. Without access to data, obviously, many of the programs will not even be able to be reached. And then a local economic development against it, that the people working with can also really see that it is triggering an income, that it's triggering a forecast of a sustainable income. So that leads me then again back to this, I would say this experience that we have with Close the Gap. At the group level, and it was said already by Frederick in his introduction and in the video as well. So we've more or less managed over 1.8 million devices that have been upcycled through Close the Gap's programs in the 4 geographies where we work. Most of them are still done in Belgium and the Netherlands historically. All of our outbound projects, we really aim to have a 20+ Mbps internet connectivity. Definitely in Kenya, that's today the case. We also have 20 digi-trucks, which are like mobile digital tech rooms on wheels that basically are going to certain areas. I talked about the informal economy, where sometimes you just need to have a different instrument to tackle remote areas, dangerous environments, flooded areas. So we do that with those digitrucks. In total, we've had over 1,750 computer classrooms that have been enabled with our devices, where we started with BRS 2 decades ago. I think also in many of those projects, which still go on, but obviously this was more the educational pillar, where today we are more focusing on the entrepreneurial pillar. And we're proud to say from the statistics that over 55% of all the projects we've been engaged with are women-led. Then to walk the talk with what we do at Close the Gap. So after those first 2-3 years being in Mombasa, now we are 5 years there. We realized we were doing lots of blah blah in the beginning, engaging with young people, telling them how a future could look like for them if they would set up an early stage business model into an MVP and become employed there. But then obviously if you don't have the seed capital to make it happen, it was also very frustrating, because then at the end of the day, those people would have to just go back to what we call in Kenya hustling. Hustling is the word that you hear every day, 1,000 times too often. It's like people having 5, 6, 7 jobs to survive the day. So even very qualified people that would have a job for 4 hours in a very decent environment, but relatively low paid, they would still have to do like all type of other jobs, and often jobs that not necessarily keep them also in the best of their values. And that's where we said, let's create our own Close the Gap Impact Accelerator Fund. I'm very proud to say today that we have a couple of early adopters of this fund here in the audience, and amongst others, Stichting Gilles has also been a very big sponsor and partner in putting that seed capital available. We've been running it now since 2.5 years, and I just will quickly show you some metrics. So over 100 employment opportunities have been created already through the funds, over 20 trained people as well. As you can see, women-led with 64% of female founders and leaders. Here, there's actually some pages of the report of that fund. So I just want to briefly show you that it's really about all type of NIA Ventures is a consulting firm. You saw the two founders on the video, but we have Blue Radio, for instance. So a couple of boys and girls from one of the Mombasa regions that basically invested through the fund in creating a radio station. Today they are the most listened to radio in Mombasa already, and they actually use radio as a way of communicating, I would say, positive stories to youth about motivating them to go for entrepreneurial ventures. They also get money in because of doing corporate editions for corporates, video editings, and they are all of them are already post-revenue generating. Obviously, very small companies still, but really, in the space of growing. We have a company doing plastic taka creations using plastics from the oceans that they're rebuilt into products using our makerspace for them. An eco-print company, a clean tech company, Rafiki Peps, and then that's from the second cohort, and from the first cohort, and I'm not sure if Robert is in the audience today, from Roca Bax. Yeah, Robert, can you just stand up 1 minute if you want? Because this is a beautiful coincidence. Yeah. At the time of preparation of my presentation, I didn't know you would make it because he had quite an issue of getting his Schengen visa on time for a completely unrelated event. But he was in our very first cohort. And so he realized that, like everywhere in the world, you have all those banners that often are made with a specific title for an event, and often after that event they are waste. And so he made a circular economy plan, getting back thousands of those plastics banners in a recurrent manner, because most of the base equipment is very quality plastic, and he makes like all type of handbag, laptops bag, fashion bags. He has fashion shows in Mombasa, and I think up to the president's family is wearing some of his Roca bags, and we're very proud having Robert with a prototype even here. Yeah. So to wrap up on this specific Impact Accelerator Fund, because I thought also with an audience of impact investors and bankers, retired bankers, to show you some tangible output from our relatively mini environment, but again with the dream that this can be multiplicated not only by ourselves but by many other organizations and be pushed forward by initiatives like BRS. So with 350,000 euro actually basic investment, we've now had 11 quasi-equity deals closed, so the ones I showed you. Typically, ticket sizes here are between $15,000 and $50,000. We've had 90 other startups that are in the pipeline, but that are not yet investor ready, so they are being trained in our accelerator program in the hub in Mombasa, often with physical trainings. And there is 600 others in our incubator, because there we do every week, every Fridays, there is hackathons, and then all people from the community are invited to come. And we have professional facilitators in all domains, from blue economy to agri-tech to ed-tech. And those ideas come up, and obviously many of them will not necessarily come to fruition, but it's at least work in progress, and it shows that the ideas are countless. There's 30 masterclasses that have been giving, and over 1,000 hours of coaching to those founders and their teams. And last year we got in Mombasa by the local VBO, FEB, VBO, in Kenya it's called KEPSA, Kenya Enterprise Private Sector Association. We got 3 awards for the best SME enabler in Kenya. So our own Close the Gap Limited, so that's the entity in Mombasa. We now have 40 direct FTEs in our team that are on our payroll, more or less half in the hub and the other half in the IT upcycling factory that you've seen in the videos as well. That's in the port area. We have over 450 indirect jobs that have been created, including interns. Over 2,000 people have been trained. Together with the logo you see downstairs left is the VDAB Forum from Kenya, NITA. So we have a partnership with them for youth below 35 that when they get internships in the Close the Gap ecosystem, that it's really also qualified as a formal diploma, and that can then be used for them to get a positive, pushed into some jobs through the network of NITA. Over 1.2 million people have now had improved access via unique accessibility through those 60,000 devices that every year are being brought to the market. I've mentioned the 60,000 just. And then a couple of other statistics of our co-creations and innovation sessions. So this is in a nutshell the work we've been doing. Here a couple of pictures to show you how a Digitruck looks like on the left-hand side. Just to give a little bit of couleur locale to the work we do. And then to wrap up before the Q&A, I also put some logos of all the kind of ecosystem partners, which I saw that many of you present here today, also to acknowledge the big support we get from you, from some direct, from some indirect, from some by just being there as an ecosystem partner in the regions where we work. So I'm very proud having so many of you here present today. And again, I want to thank with asking a big round of applause to BRS, because I think with the steady decades of work you've been doing, you've been really avant la lettre already showing that impact investment and involvement actually in a modern way of working with talent from Europe and money from Europe together with talent in Africa, that was the way forward, which today everybody acknowledged, but you already did it before it became mainstream. And I want to thank you so much, Kurt, for having allowed me to give this story here of our work. So thank you very much also to all of you.
Thanks for the kind words. And it's always difficult if you have a passionate speaker. Then you have to find the right balance with the time. But you did it very good, so we still have time for questions. I will hand the microphone to my colleagues. You just raise your hand, but use the microphone, because we also have people following this on the live stream, and then they can hear your question too. But I already received one specific question on the financing. Talk about money coming from Belgium for investing, but the question is about to what extent is the local, the African financial world involved in the financing of your companies? And not only let's say, the banking sector, but this is the Microfinance Lunch break. Also, to what extent do you see the microfinance sector involved in the financing of companies?
I think on the level of Close the Gap itself, today we are lucky to be a self-sufficient company, so we are working on a light positive result. So we passed the break-even stage. So to create that turnover, in our case, it's kind of probably 65-70% is all local payments done from our hardware business. I think that's the success we have in this hybrid model with our hub and with our hardware business, that they are in the same P&L, because as all of you will know, and I'm sure also the KBC started models, it's very difficult to make a hub, definitely in this early stage, to do that in a profitable way. Definitely in a country like Kenya and Mombasa, where you have heat and you need ACs to have some climate control if people want to be successful, working from morning till evenings in coding and so on. So you have lots of costs to bear. But so on our level, we are lucky that our normal operating activity can cover our costs today. When we look at the Impact Accelerator Fund, there the money is today exclusively still coming from Belgium investors, sometimes really as an investment in a debt or an equity format, or as a convertible grant, so to say, from some more philanthropic investors. So this on the Close the Gap level. On the more overall level, I would say that, yeah, in Nairobi, if you look to Nairobi, it's really a big financial tech environment. There's lots of funds as well in all flavors and colors. So the access to capital for, I would say, the bigger chunk of investments is definitely there and is very well organized. I think the biggest challenge remains that so-called missing middle. And there I have not really seen lots of local investments coming up from existing entities. Yeah. Microfinance, obviously, yes. And I'm sure the Incofin, with also an office in Nairobi, will very well know that ecosystem. We don't work one-on-one with microfunders today.
Okay. Some questions from the audience? Just keep thinking about a question, but some people have sent some questions in advance in writing, and one is related specifically to, thanks for coming over and inspire us. This was already sent before you said something. But here, as we see that China and other emerging markets are growing faster than Europe, our European economy is under attack. What can we, as Western Europeans, learn from the mindset or behavior from the southern countries, and do we need to implement some of these aspects in our own daily business?
Yeah, I'm just...
Short question.
Yeah, very short. So,
what can we learn from
What
Africa
we can learn from China?
And China and other emerging markets growing faster than Europe. Yeah. So including Africa.
Yeah, I think that's one for me of the learnings and the mind-blowing experience living in an emerging country like Kenya for the last 5 years, and still, since COVID allowed us again, traveling quite a bit between Europe and Africa. I don't go to China. I've not really had the occasion. I don't really know China from inside, but what I see in Kenya, and that might be a bit of a controversial topic, but let's say the feeling I usually get is quite positive. In Europe, I hear there's lots of a prioris often about how the Chinese are doing business, and definitely now with elections coming up, we heard quite a bit of potential influences from that side on our, let's say, elections processes. But so that I will not go in that debate because it's not really my cup of tea. But if I look at how the Chinese are investing in Africa, I see also definitely living in Mombasa, we have like some big infrastructure projects that I've seen happening literally in the couple of years that I've been living there. And so one of them is now in Nairobi. You have what we call the expressway. When I moved to Kenya 5 years ago, I was literally telling my wife, being close to getting 40, whatever I'll do, I want to move to Africa, but I don't want to live in a congested city where Nairobi was called a one meeting a day city at that time. People would not even go out for a drink to people or friends that would be, let's say, 5 kilometers down the road of their hotel, because you might be 4 hours in the car for that trip, not knowing it. When you landed with, let's say, KLM or Air France, the cabin crew would announce at the off-boarding time that you have to be 5 or 6 hours before departure back at the airport, because so many people were losing flights. Nowadays, they really built in less than 2 years. You saw some of the work coming from left to right, from east to west, I think a 25-kilometer expressway. And it's a toll road. And yeah, Nairobi is a game changer. People can move again. I'm not saying that everyone is able to use it. So that's what I mean. There is some controversial about it, that it's not always inclusive for everyone, but from an investment point of view, I see good things happening. A second example is the SGR. So there is now a train that goes from Nairobi to Mombasa, a complete new train rack. I've used it a couple of times, and let's say for 1,000 shillings, so today for 7-8 euros, you can travel from the capital city to the second city of Mombasa. All of that has been done with Chinese investments. And so if you ask me about China, I think Europe can definitely also learn a lot about the good things they do, and probably they could learn a lot about some of our more rightfully concerns when it gets on probably ecological and human rights discussions. So yes, as an entrepreneur, opportunistically set, and then I'll end on that quote. When I speak to Kenyan entrepreneurs, they would tell me I prefer to work with a well-functioning Chinese-built train than with a non-well-functioning, let's say, local train. So I think they look at it very, very opportunistically, and if it works and it's doing what it needs to do and it's paying taxes correctly, what all those investments are doing, because everything is cash-free and everything is online payments, you really see lots of improvements for the local economy.
Yeah. Still looking here in this room if somebody is raising the hand. Now I see 3 people. Yep.
Hello. Thank you very much for your conference. Very interesting, all the work you're doing. So I work for an NGO called Trias, but I'm originally from Guatemala, and I've seen some projects that have been developed similarly to this. And I was just wondering, one of the issues that they have passed there is that a lot of the people that live in these rural areas, sometimes they were malnutrition since their early days of life, which that results in their not having probably the skills after in their life because their brain didn't develop properly, or biologically their body wasn't well nutrited. So what this eventually results is that they get these computers or this help or this digitally help, but they don't use it properly because they don't have these skills because of what happened in their early lives. And also, well, these people are also struggling with not having education and all of these things that surround poverty. So I was wondering if this is something that you have also struggled with, and how have you tackled it?
So specifically on the malnutrition, or?
I mean, I feel like the malnutrition is probably the base of why then they later don't have these education skills, and then they also don't go to school, and well, it's just like kind of a ladder.
Yeah, I think that, to come back to something I said earlier on the Maslow pyramid, I think if you really see that those very basic needs are not taken care of, probably those people, unfortunately, would not typically come in our ecosystem right away, and they would be supported by more NGOs and welfare-oriented organizations. I know in Kenya there is a very good focus on the schooling system, and as you know, in many developing and emerging countries, schools are not only there because of the critical education need, but also the fact that kids are fed decently and often with also good aliments and balanced food requirements. So yeah, in Kenya, my feeling is, but Robert and some of the other Kenyan friends here might know that even better than me, because I have 2 kids as well that go to school in Mombasa. But my feeling is that the school's education system is quite well organized, and that those basic needs are taken care of for a vast majority of the people. But definitely in some more congested, problematic areas like Kibera, where I'm not very familiar with, it's in Nairobi, there is lots of work done by NGOs on those type of challenges, also on the medical side, on domestic violence, and all the typical challenges that come in highly congested areas, in poor areas. Yeah.
Thank you.
The microphone is also handed over to people in the back. No?
It's over here, I think.
Hello.
Thank you. I was wondering, so obviously the level of livelihood and must increase in Africa, but in sub-Saharan Africa especially, I think. But how do you tackle the challenge? I hear you talking about digital inclusion, ACs to cool the computers, to not use too many resources, to limit the CO2 and footprint in Africa. Do you work around that, or is it all solar powered, or how do we not make the same mistakes in Africa we did in Europe and the rest of the rich world?
Yeah. Kenya, I think we are relatively lucky there from an energy perspective. From what I'm told, over 85% of Kenyan energy provision is already renewables because of lots of hydro, lots of solar, lots of renewable energies. So that's one thing. Secondly, the reuse of computers. That's a very known statistic. If you look to the total life cycle of a device, whether it's a phone or a laptop or any device, 85% of the CO2 emissions in the full life cycle of the average life cycle is already emitted and produced in the production time. So from that perspective, in our model of the circular economy, actually, if you can reuse a device that was used at KBC Bank for 36 months, and then it can still get a decent lease of life for another 5 years on average, but then you're already reducing significantly. Obviously, that device for those 5 years will use the power that in this case, if it's in Kenya, would already be renewable power. This being said, many projects that we do outside of the cities would use off-grid systems and would use solar-based panels. You see lots of schools as well. Kenya has lots of end-to-end solar systems for consumers where you can actually just buy it's kind of a leasing model. There is hundreds of companies doing that, very affordable, that you get a small solar panel on your roof, whether you live in a very unfortunate housing condition or you're in a middle class or in a high class environment, and then that would provide you enough power to load like definitely a mobile unit, but also a laptop, for instance. But I agree with you. It's a very very spot-on topic that if tomorrow. If you see that 28% of the people are connected now to the internet, if that will become just like here over 57-70%, there will be much more power consumption as well. And I think that's also the reason why in our country President Ruto is very much investing also on the renewable energy and mostly on the distribution, because that's a challenge in a big country like Kenya. The production of the power is there, but it's the distribution that actually is still work in progress to make it available to all the areas without interruptions, without losses.
Okay, thank you. I have time, looking for the time also, that we have one long or two short questions. Sir?
I would have a question, if I may, about the scalability of what you have been doing. Olivier, let me first congratulate you. I was very impressed by the presentation. I think the journey that you have been on has been excellent. I like, and probably we all like, the passion that you have been emanating, the results, all the tangible results that you have been presenting. But if you think about all these good things, one of the challenges is how can you make that scalable? I mean, if we want to give these the hundreds and maybe billions of people that still are not there yet a better future, a sustainable future, a better perspective for their lives, then there is still much more to be done. So my question would be, and it is a hypothetical question, and forgive me if it is not a fair question to confront you with that today, but what would need to happen for you and the company to, let's say, to triple or to have the impact 10 times or have the activities 10 times in different countries and different cities, doesn't matter, right? How can you scale this hypothetically to dimensions that are much bigger than what you have been talking about today?
I think if I look at our Close the Gap ecosystem, the positive side we have here is that there is a business model around the end-of-life devices. You see, today our business model is still very much focused on the import of devices from Belgium and Dutch companies, because the circular economy here, circular IT, I would say, is already quite straightforward and mainstream here. Everybody knows about it. In COVID times, we've even seen that government was pushing for it. Our Minister of Education, that's also how Digital for Youth has become a very large player also in Belgium because of this beautiful top-down and bottom-up push. What you see in developing countries, and even in emerging countries, I was in South Africa just last week, is that it's still far away from being mainstream. Because there is lots of informal economy, there is not enough awareness about the benefits, there is sometimes utilization of devices in rough circumstances, not necessarily like here in a good ventilated building. Don't forget also in this part of the world now, we probably all have 2 or 3 devices. We have one at home. At the time, the company device of mom or dad was used in the evening for the kids or for the personal banking. Nowadays, it stays at the office and you use your personal, bring your own device once you're in the car or out of lunches and so on. So you see the devices here basically are used less and the fair market value and the usability is increasing. Secondly, you also see that production companies, OEMs, original equipment manufacturers, amongst other and very much by the EU, are being pushed as well of stopping the so-called planned obsolescence in the products. And that's not only for IT, it's also for your washing machines. The planned obsolescence, I think, is something we've seen for the last decades, that products have been built with the aim of failing. And the sooner or the better for the cheaper brands, and then the more high-end brands, they probably design it that it goes longer. This is now taken care of on a global way, that companies need to build and design products so that they live longer, that if they fail, there is a repairability. So those are two points I want to add. In Africa, in the countries where we operate, I don't see competitors. In South Africa, a couple of them, but we are kind of the only one doing this in Kenya, now also in DRC. So I would see an enormous multiplication effect if companies there, and definitely if the multinationals would start already with often decision centers in this part of the world and already experience with data protection and how ITAD, as we call it, IT asset disposition works, to do that. So on that end, I'm really very optimistic that it will be a kind of a snowball that will never be able to stop, because there is one point, soon we'll have 2 billion Africans on the continent by 2050, I believe. If each of them will at least have one device, and on average perhaps even 1.5, I mean, then those type of companies will see them coming up as champignons uit de grond, as we say. On the hub side, I'm also quite optimistic. I think the access to this seed capital is important, and you see that lots of work is happening. But the real difficulty there is that it's very hands-on work, and you cannot just put that in a computerized ERP system. You really need to sit together with those young people. You need to coach them, just like we do in incubators and accelerators around the world here. So there, I would see an organization that's Close the Gap. We are definitely not reinventing the hot water. We are doing, I believe, great work for Mombasa in the coast. But in Nairobi, you would see organizations doing what we do that are much bigger than us, that would, probably there is 20 or 30 accelerators and incubators doing amazing work, and that's why it's called the Silicon Savannah today. So I'm optimistic. I think the amazing amount of work done. We are a member with Close the Gap from an association called AfriLabs, so African Labs. They're based, I think, in Kigali. And from the last time I looked at their General Assembly, there is over 200 hubs, kind of all doing the same as us in sub-Saharan Africa. So probably to your question, I would hope that there is much more multiplication and that the people running this type of hubs, we do it more and more in a kind of an open source modus, so not like a private owned company where you keep it lean and let's say closed and only for yourself. But here we see we work together with our peers also in Mombasa. And if this collaboration continues to happen, I really think the African continent will by far generate most of the impact entrepreneurs in the next 20 years to come, undoubtedly.
Okay, thank you. Unfortunately, looking to the time, I have to wrap up the session. But fortunately, I can all of you invite you for the lunch. And I would like to thank KBC for the whole facilities, including the lunch that we will join. You will also stay, Olivier, during the lunch. So your question, I propose that you ask it directly to him. And then I have to thank you very much. And here a small present from our organization. All the best.
Thank you. Thank you. Wow. Thank you.